The night after Hardhome never really ended for Jon Snow. Dawn came the way it did in deep winter north of the Wall, as an easing of darkness rather than light. Gray leaked into the sky, a thin wash of pallor behind the jagged teeth of ice, and the wind that combed down from the haunted forests found every seam in his cloak and whispered into it. He had slept for an hour, perhaps two, long enough for dreams to curdle back into memory, and now he stood on the wall with his gloved hands wrapped around the rim of a cold stone merlin and watched the sky consider morning. Ghost pressed against his legs with the unself-conscious insistence of a creature that had never known doubt. The direwolf's coat was thickened by winter until it seemed to drink the light. His breath came in slow, white flurries that broke and reformed around Jon's knees. The smell of ghost, iron, clean snow, a hint of animal musk, reached Jon even through the wind's knife. It anchored him against the other smells rising from the courtyard below. Pitch smoke, horse, pine branches freshly stripped and burning, the sour tang of old leather drying beside the kitchens. Somewhere a man coughed until the cough turned to a rattle and faded. Somewhere a child, one of the free folk brats come through the gate, cried and then was hushed. If he closed his eyes, the wind remade itself into surf. He saw the black bar of the Hardhome cliffs and the water filling with shapes that were not beasts and not boats, and the snow of gulls wheeling over it, and he could no longer tell if the whiteness flecking the sea was birds or bits of breaking bone. He'd never smelled the sea without thinking of salt. Hardhome had taught him there were other waters. There was a stink to that place he could not name, something like iron and lime and the old damp of crypts, a smell that lived at the back of his throat as if he'd swallowed a coin and could not cough it up. He opened his eyes and looked into the softening dark. Somewhere out there the dead still moved where the surf could not wash them away. Somewhere out there a blue gaze as cold as the wall's heart measured the world and found everything wanting. The thought felt like a blade under the ribs, but Jon did not look down. He let the cold have him. He counted breaths and watched the faint light gather behind the ice. Footsteps clinked on the stair. Dolorous Ed came up with a bundle of cloaks slung over one shoulder and a cup of something steaming in his other hand. Even here, even now, Ed's face managed a perfected mournfulness, like a stone effigy carved to complain. "You know," Ed said by way of greeting, "some men sleep. It's a habit like breathing. I'd recommend breathing while you're at it. Saves on funeral expenses." Jon took the cup. It was black broth, bitter enough to make him grit his teeth, but hot, and it ran heat into his hands as he used the cup for warmth more than drink. "How are things below?" "Well," Ed said, "the stables are full. The storehouses are full. The latrines are full. It's the full life at Castle Black." Tormund and his flock pulled in another 100 souls at first light. Brought a man on a sled with a leg going from white to black, so that's pleasant for the kitchens. They love a challenge. "Any word from Eastwatch?" "I've asked the Ravens to write, but they've developed ideas above their station." Ed leaned his elbows on the ice as if he were leaning at a tavern bar. His breath fogged and the fog blew away. "They say the storm went that way last night. If there's sense in storms, it didn't show it to me." Below them, the great courtyard was a slow-motion anthill. Dark figures crossed it in knots, in single file, bearing bundles on their backs or balancing poles between them. A sledge creaked. The smiths had fires going already. Sparks leaped and died and leaped again. The gate, heavy black timbers banded with iron, sat slightly ajar as if a hand had just eased it open and someone had paused in the gap, somewhere between leaving and arriving. He thought of the eyes in the dark beyond that gate, 1,000 pairs watching them from a distance no eye could measure. He imagined the dead hushed in the woods, listening the way a hunter listens to a trapped buck thrash itself to exhaustion. The wind plucked at his hair under his hood. Between his boots, the ice of the wall was blue and white, swirled like old glass where the cold had hardened it in layers not even the summers of his life could count. "There's another thing," Ed said with the expression of a man delivering rotten fruit. "A rider come at dawn. Banner hidden, which is always a polite way to visit. Turned out to be Moore's Umber's boy with 2 older men and a taste for one of our kettles. The boy's teeth chatter so much he answers questions he's not asked. He claims his lord wants a word with our Lord Commander, and it's a word best spoken not in any ear but the ear it wants. John sipped the bitter broth and let it burn his tongue. More's Umber wants to talk in secret. So says the boy. Free folk have a proverb. I think, if a man brings you a secret in winter, see if he's got a knife under it. Tormund has a proverb for everything. True. He makes them up when he runs out. Ed gave John a sidelong look. You haven't asked what Umber wants. I can guess. John thought of a boy's voice in the shield hall crying, winter will eat us all if we don't learn to eat together. He remembered Tormund standing on a table and the way the men in black had looked at him as if a bear had walked into a chapel. He wants a promise I can't make, or he wants to bind me to one I refused already. Ed's brows drew together, a knitting of sorrow. Refusing is noble work when it's done by men who have something to give up. For myself, I find refusing goes easier when I've nothing to lose. There's a great freedom to living with nothing. I know what I can't be, John said quietly, and I know what I must. Very good, Ed said. The worst decisions happen when men don't know either. Speaking of knowing things, the kitchens will have oatcakes if we get down before all the children. I fear the children the way I've never feared a southern king. Say the word and I'll throw you over my shoulder and carry you down, so we can have two. John rubbed Ghost's neck with a hand that had begun to ache from cold. The dire wolf tipped his head, eyes half-lidded in animal pleasure. Tell them to keep the boy warm. See Umber's men fed and by a fire. I'll meet them in the Lord Commander's room. Ed nodded. Very good. He did not move. The wind took his words off like paper scraps. After a moment he said, softer. You saw more than ships at Hardhome. John knew what Ed asked. He saw again the moment the sea had ceased to be water and become a path. The sound it made when the dead found it. The way that sound emptied the world of other sounds. He saw the figure on the cliff, not moving at all as the chaos boiled beneath him. A single point around which the sea and snow turned. I saw the cold take a shape, John said. It wasn't a storm. It was what a storm obeyed. Ed let out a breath that might have been a prayer, if he had been a man to pray. Then here's a thought to warm you. If it's taken shape, it can be put back to pieces. John allowed himself a thin approximation of a smile. Tell me that again when the oatcakes are done. As you command, my liege. If I'd known 2 burnt discs of oats could buy such hope, I'd have been a baker. Ed took up the empty cup and clapped John on the arm with the rough affection of a man who expected grief more than any other inheritance. Come down before you grow to the wall. Some of us will need to move you. John stood a while longer. The sky accepted a little light. The cold saw that acceptance and deepened in answer. He descended when his fingers told him the time had come, not trusting himself to carry his weight if the cold had its way any longer. The stair wound down the inner face of the ice like the thread of a snail's shell, and the wind followed them, tugging at cloaks. The world tilted from sky to courtyard as he descended, until the bustle became large enough to be men again and not ants, and the noises of the keep, hammer, bucket, voice, gathered him back into them. Ghost went ahead of him past a pair of brothers with their faces wrapped to the eyes. The direwolf moved like a spirit everyone could see. Men stepped aside without knowing they'd done it. Some touched their forehead or chest as if he were luck that could be borrowed. Some made nothing of it, eyes on their work. Tormund made something of everything. Boy! Tormund boomed as soon as John came off the stair. He was too pleased for the word to insult. The wildling chief was wrapped in a bearskin rich enough to shame a king's furred cape and patched with more stitches than a poor man's stocking. His beard held 3 icicles like little trophies. I sent my best men to the kitchens and they came back with a bucket of porridge and 1 spoon. They will break each other's heads with it if you don't walk me down the hall like your mother. I never knew a man to fear children as much as Ed, John said. Now I'll add Tormund to the tally. I fear honest hunger and small hands, Tormund said. Those are dangerous things. This keep is a trap, boy. It smells like we've captured a forest and stuffed it down the chimneys. Did you hear? Umber's whelp is here with a mouth full of something and a head emptier than a cracked gourd. You'll want to flog the truth from him, but I advise starting with sausage. John's boots carried him into the low, smoky warmth of the common hall, where the rafters disappeared into soot and the fire made a punch of light. The free folk clustered near the hearth like driftwood caught on a rock. They'd come through the gate in pieces these past days, weary and wide-eyed, some of them with the blank stares of those who had stared out of their lives one too many times. They weren't his, not by law, not by oath, and yet here they were, and many would be dead if he had not broken the rules men loved more than the lives they protected. He thought of Ser Alistair's thin-lipped contempt and Bowen Marsh's stricken eyes. He thought of the tough little hands of a girl child he had lifted over the gate. He thought of how light she'd been, as if bones had lost their mind on her way up the wall. "Oatcakes," Ed said with the gravity of a pronouncement, putting 2 wooden platters in John's hands and 3 in Tormund's. "Your first, my lord, your last, my sorrow." He drifted off muttering to himself about saints and their unwarranted happiness. They ate standing, the cakes dry enough to rasp the throat but filling. John watched a little boy, no more than 5, stare at Ghost in wonder so round it was almost pain. The boy reached and withdrew his hand 6 times before his mother, a gaunt woman with a scar down one cheek like a lightning strike, nodded permission and put her hand over his small one to teach it the way to pet a beast's shoulder. Ghost endured it with the patience of the old, which to John felt like a blessing, though Ghost was not yet old in years. In other things, age had nothing to do with time. "Now," Tormund said, brushing oat crumbs out of his beard, where they clung like snow on bracken. "What do you plan to say to Umber's pup that won't make him want to throw you in his sled and pull you off to the First Lord that has a dry cloak to offer?" "Whatever I say," John said, "I won't say it with you at my elbow." Tormund grinned and showed thick teeth. "You need your elbow more than most men. I'll be in the yard when you're done. Somebody found a broken wheel and I'm minded to teach the children a game before the winter takes the games out of them." John entered the Lord Commander's solar with Ghost's shoulder brushing his thigh. The room was neither grand nor comfortable. The bookcase and maps were the comfort. The hearth had been tended carefully and a quiet blaze pushed back the cold with neither roar nor crackle. Moore's Umber's boy stood near the table, lusting at the warmth and trying not to appear to lust. 2 older men bracketed him, faces painted with the cold like men come up from a long dive. Bowen Marsh stood at the far wall with his hands layered, his mouth drawn tight as if he were holding bits of himself between his teeth. "Lord Commander," Marsh said, "this is Roder, brother to the grandson of Crowfood Umber's 3rd sister. The men he brought claim to be Kenrick and will loot. Sworn men to last hearth." "Sworn? Aye," Kenrick said with satisfaction, as if the word were a morsel to savor. He had a funeral of a face and a beard that had learned to go gray in streaks. "We were sent because we have eyes and know what we look at." Roder's nose was red and peeled where he'd burned it in the sun, and the sun had burned the cold back out of him. He had the upper Umber look, blunt and certain. His gaze went to Ghost and stayed a beat too long before it dragged back to John. "Speak," John said gently. "Tell me what your lord asks." Roder set his jaw as if he were lifting something. "My lord will not send a letter to be read by a maester he doesn't own. He says quills lie more politely than men. He says the North has had its fill of polite lies." He looked at the 2 older men as if looking at them might help his words, then returned to John. "He says he's no friend to crows. He says he remembers crows coming by last hearth all smiles and long beards and leaving with boys who never came back. He says that same lot gave his kin to a bowl, to a flayed man's name, once. Not your doing, he knows, but he keeps his teeth on a bone a long while." "And?" John asked, when the boy faltered. "He says while he keeps his teeth, he knows what he knows. That was a king's man's business, and this is Winter's business. He says you sent him food for the villages nearest the forest roads when nobody else did. Not even men who named themselves as betters. He says your wild men guarded the bread as fiercely as his own, and he's seen less honor in a gold-cloaked lordling." Roder swallowed. "He says he's too old to be a fool forever. The North needs one head that can count and one hand to lift. He's seen the heads that claim the counting. He says if you'll take it, he'll put his hand under yours." Bowen Marsh's breath inhaled like a hiss that did not quite become sound. Kenrick cleared his throat as if to dislodge the memory of 100 winters. "What the boy means is this. Our lord says the North needs a warden. Not the kind of warden who keeps the king's peace by harrying farmers when they don't pay their tax quick enough, but a winter warden who can hold the roads and see where the wolves are. He says if you'll be that warden, he'll back you." Not in ink, in men. Ghost's eyes caught the fire. John felt the words land inside him in a place that had been waiting even if he had not named what it waited for. The word itself carried such weight. Warden. In the South it was a title that came with a gold coat and a jeweled sword. Here it sounded like a burden a man picked up with both hands and knew what part of him would break under it first. How many men does Lord Umber offer? Bowen said, mild and sharp at once. Enough to make a noise in the woods. Lute said, a little gleam of humor in eyes otherwise tired to bone. Enough to fill a hall and empty a larder. Enough to make it matter if they go one way or another. He's not the only one. There are other names. Not all will send boys through the snow for a crow to talk to. But the mountain clans set a watch, and the flints don't change their minds any more than rocks do. And the men under the Riswells will follow a strong winter hand whether you like their lord's collar or not. John looked at the table. The map rolled there was worn at the edges by a century of fingers, updated with little scraps of vellum pasted delicately where a river had shifted, where a keep had changed name or a bridge had collapsed and been rebuilt by poorer workmen and worse lords. He saw the north as a shape of need, villages that had not seen a rider in 3 months and would mistake any rider for a taxman or a thief. Hamlets with smoke so thin it meant the last manure paddies had gone into the fire. Farms eaten in 3 winters by the forest because no man had hands to hold the trees back. He saw white moving in through it all like breath across glass. You know my oath, John said. He did not say it the way he said the old words in the sept or beneath the heart tree, but the shape of it was there in his voice. It binds me. Bind yourself or the snow will, Kenrick said. I've been bound by both. Only one keeps you warm. Bowen Marsh lost the fight with his breath. My lord, he said, and the words were knives wrapped in cloth, polite and cutting. You know in your heart what this is. The watch has survived because it belongs to no man and no house. If you said it's Lord Commander to a lord's task, what is a lord's task? John asked. Quiet. Guarding men, Bowen said. From other men. John let the words live in the room for a few breaths. And if it's guarding them from what isn't a man? If no lord's task applies because no lord has done it before? Kenrick shifted as if his back ached. You have a king's letter, boy. Or you don't. All eyes went to the coffer near the hearth as if the letter might decide to climb out of it and walk over on its own legs. The wax seal sat there like a sleeping red eye, cracked around the edges but unbroken across its heart. The letter had arrived the night before with a rider almost too frozen to peel from his saddle. The rider had spoken Stannis's name with the exhausted reverence of a man who had not yet learned what kind of god he served. John had not broken the seal because breaking a seal broke something in him too. He walked to the coffer now, lifted the letter, and turned it in his fingers. The ribbon was stiff as if it had been dipped in ice. On the back the stamp of the crowned stag was exact and clean, as if it had been carved out of winter itself. Burn it, Bowen Marsh said, urgency cracking through his decorum. Or read it if you must, but burn it after. No good comes in from the south. It arrives on a fine horse and leaves on a dead one. Lord Commander, Kenrick said, a little courtesy tucked into the gruffness. A man your age spends too long deciding because he knows decisions last. I say, stop deciding and read. Put it into your head, so all our heads can argue about the same meat. John broke the seal. The sound it made was softer than he thought it would be, like a feather tearing. He skated his thumb over the wax rend as if tracing a wound. The letter smelled faintly of tallow and the hint of some spice a southern fire enjoyed when it burned. He read. The words were clean and cold and sure. They did not beg. They did not praise. They made no promises he would be fool enough to believe. They named him what Stannis had named him months before, and he had refused. They acknowledged that the Watch's vows made that name impossible. They offered a solution that John had not allowed himself to imagine with any seriousness. A wardenship limited to winter's work, not to hold lands or levy taxes, not to take sides in the human quarrels that had turned the north into a butcher's yard, but to hold the roads, to gather harvests, to assign patrols that any lord must obey if he wished his people to see spring. The king's hand signed beneath it with a name that had lost the habit of yielding to the world. Another hand had made a note in a smaller script, the Onion Knight's plain letters, stark on the page, adding that White Harbor's lord had shown a will to be led, that the Mormonts watched, that the Karstarks were a snarl no man should expect to pull his fingers from unbitten. The note did not flatter. It advised. It asked less than it offered. It made clear that the king's own work in the south and around Winterfell would not wait for one man's private battle with his own vows. Jon let the letter drop to his side without lowering it fully. He felt oddly steady. He placed it on the table next to the map and smoothed it as if smoothing a child's hair. Tormund did not wait to be asked what he thought. He had not waited to be asked for the door either. He filled it now with his size and his certainty, pulled it shut behind him with his pelted shoulder, and grinned like a man about to call out a bear for a dance. "A pretty bit of crow scratch," Tormund said cheerfully. "Tell me if any of it puts meat in the pot. If it does, I'll kiss the king's but where he sits to write." Bowen Marsh frowned as if a song had drifted in at a funeral. Roder shifted from foot to foot, trying to be brave and 15 at once. Kenrick's eyes had gone to the map as if the words had already taken shape on it. Jon looked from man to man. "What's needed?" he said. "The roads," Lute said. "The roads between Last Hearth and the Bar Rollins are clogged with drifts, and the drifts are clogged with men fit only for burying. If the dead go back to walking, they'll use roads same as we do. If they do, the living need to know which ones to avoid and which ones to hold. If a warden tells them, some of them will live when they would have died wondering." "Food," Kenrick said. "It's always food. Not now, it's always. But now more so. If we start counting, if we do it honestly, we can send carts to where warehouses sit with rot under their salt and bring it to where the cookpots scrape the bottom of themselves for something to taste." "Hands," said Tormund. "That's a fancy southerner's way of saying people. But I mean hands to build. Hands to put weight on a thing that's light because someone died who used to lift it. Men to fell trees and lay them to block the smaller passes so the dead don't wander in like a drunk into a woman's parlor." "Word," said Bowen Marsh, surprising them, his tone almost fierce. "Not rumor. Word. A single set of rules about where to go and when. About where to gather if something breaks. If we let each village blow like leaves, they will blow into the dead and stick." They were naming it bit by bit. Jon saw it assembling itself like a machine whose parts had been scattered and forgotten, and were now being found where children had played with them. He put a hand on the map and felt under his palm the way the North had always felt to him when he'd half closed his eyes. Not lines and sigils, but distances and trouble. "Roder," he said, "tell Lord Umber I hear him. Tell him I would have come to Last Hearth for this word if I had guessed how he meant to spend it. Tell him I'll send back 5 brave souls to teach his men how to burn what won't go down easy. Tell him he'll owe me a sheep should they survive to eat it." Roder, who had expected to be turned away, perhaps with courtesy, straightened as if something in him had been shored up. "I'll tell him." "Kenrick," Jon said, "how many of yours can ride to clan lands and back without getting turned twice in the trees?" Kenrick had that answer as if no night had come to trouble him. 4, 6 if they're fools. 8 if we're lucky. Send 4. Give them words like coins to change in the villages. Tell them to carry my name and no others. If they're stopped, they're to say they serve winter. Nothing more. Bowen Marsh made a sound that could have been a protest or breath-catching. Jon did not look at him. "I'll send one to White Harbor," Kenrick said, "if you're minded to stir that pot too." "I'll send that one for you," Jon said, touching the king's letter. "Stirring is a good way to keep a pot from burning." Tormund snorted. "What a pretty cook you make, boy. Leave the riding to men who know these roads," Lute said. "I'll go myself." "You're needed here," Bowen said, surprising them again. He sounded as if the words had cost him a piece of himself. "When this blows, the wind will find us first. We will need men who can put their backs under a thing without having to be told twice." Will considered him for a long beat and then nodded once. Jon felt something begin to turn. Not a quick turn, not a wheel spinning on ice, but a slow, grinding turn the way a millstone turns, and the grain beneath it knew it was becoming something else. He dismissed Kenrick and Will to the warmth and the kitchens and their own wise mutterings, set 2 stolid brothers to see to Roder, and kept Bowen and Tormund with him. He expected Marsh to let loose the fear that had clung to his clothes like smoke these past weeks. Instead, Bowen came forward a step, stopped as if uncertain, and then came the rest of the way. "You can't be both," Bowen said simply. His eyes were red with sleeplessness and a determination of an older sort, one that believed in things because to stop believing would make the man disappear. "You can't be our commander and their warden, John. I say it as a man who will follow you into any winter that exists. Not because I love what you want, but because I see that you won't stop wanting it when a wiser man would. If you're the warden, I will walk beside you if you let me. But you must unmake one of the two. You can't be both." Tormund shifted his weight and folded his arms, the hides creaking. "You can be what the winter makes you. If it puts a crown of icicles on your head, wear it until it melts. If it puts a chain on your neck, break it and chew the links for iron." John's mouth almost twitched and did not. "Your counsel is always vivid, meaning clever," Tormund said, pleased. I practice." John looked at Bowen. "Do you mean I must forsake my oath?" Bowen's face tightened. "I mean the watch cannot be seen to be anyone's hand. If you take this wardenship, we must choose another to be Lord Commander in the eyes of the law. Choose one who will be content to act in your shadow if he can't not. Do it openly and we survive. Do it hidden and we hide all the way into a ditch. You offer yourself?" Bowen exhaled a humorless laugh. "I offer myself to any work that keeps the wall from falling on our heads. But no, I'm a steward, not a commander. Othel will wheeze and snore, and he will die of an apoplexy before the first thaw if you lay this on him. Ed," he paused, seemed to swallow an argument. "Ed sees things none of us want to see. The men trust him more than they trust me. Dolorous as a beetle, but he'll tell a hard truth and then we'll eat the truth together." "You're recommending Edison Tollett for Lord Commander," John said, with a quiet amazement that felt like warmth in the cold. "In another world, another life, that might have made him laugh. He would hate it." "Then he is the correct choice," Bowen said flatly. "Give me a commander who has no taste for command. I'll trust him to give it back when he can." "Seven hells," Tormund said. "You South men make a great effort to say what a bear would say by throwing his head and walking away with the meat." John went to the window slit and looked out at the sky where the light had grown more sure without becoming warmer. He could feel the world balancing like a plate on a stick. Hardhome had taught him how quickly a thing could break that way. He had always been torn between two places: the name in his blood and the words he'd said to a dark and silent wood that had listened like a god. He had always believed the oath would win because he had chosen it, but the choice had been between guarding the living and guarding a rule. He tasted the difference like salt and smoke. "I won't take a lord's lands," he said. "I won't take any man's hall or name. I'll take this wardenship as winter's work, to be laid down when spring allows a fool to think himself safe. I'll stand for the roads and the food and the line we must hold in our heads so that our hands know what to do. If the North names me warden for that, I'll be it. The watch will choose a commander. I'll advise him if he'll have me. I will not leave the wall except to do the work that keeps the wall's shadow long. If I go to a lord's hall, it will be to empty his store for men with smaller names, and I'll leave my boots at his door when I do. If the watch refuses this..." Bowen shook his head. "We don't refuse. We can't. There's a shape to this winter, and if we don't fill it, something else will." His voice lowered. "You will make enemies with this. In the South, in the North, in black, in hides. They'll say you want a crown. They'll say you pretend not to want it while you gather it like a thrifty wife saves coins in a jar." John's shoulders rose and fell. He felt very young. He felt older than the wood in the rafters. "I will have Ghost and my sword and your better temper, Bowen and Tormund's inexhaustible pity for fools. Let them say what they like. The dead say nothing. For them, I'll hear it." "Fine," Tormund said, as if the matter were a loaf he'd tested and found baked through. "So be it. We'll call you something to warm the mouth. We free folk don't use wardens when a good name will do. Winterhand will suit you, or Snow Warden, or Boy Who Doesn't Die." "Please do not adopt the last," Bowen said dryly. "It will tempt men who collect such titles to correct it." "You worry like an old mother," Tormund said, without heat. "Go bring your men. Some of them will spit. Some will bow. Some will throw their spit up and hope it lands on their betters. I've seen worse ceremony." Before noon the shield hall filled. They had no cathedral to call people in and no bells to fling sound across the snow. But word flew without wings when it had the shape of rumor, and it invaded walls whether walls wanted it or not. Wildlings with their hair braided in skeins that held small bones. Black brothers with their faces hard to stubble by cold. Rough northern men with hands knotted by their work. Women whose eyes had learned to tally quiet as counting beads. Children who watched with their mouths open because they had not yet learned to make the world smaller with doubt. A giant in the doorway ducking and awkward, and the rafters groaned but held because they had been made to hold more than any man thought they would hold. One crouched in the far corner like a mountain taking a rest. He hummed softly to himself, and a baby somewhere in the press found the sound and quieted. They came because the word had formed into a shape. Stannis' seal had not done it. Umber's rough promise had not done it. Those things were kindling. The shape was the thing itself. The way 100 needs mapped themselves onto one man and his promise not to carry them like a lord ties burdens to a pack horse, but to keep them moving. Jon stood on a table because there was no dais and no man had the patience to build one. Tormund muttered something about long legs and short tables and handed him up like a hostess her most obstinate guest. A hush fell the way a snow squall falls. Swiftly at first, and then in flakes of silence until each small talk was covered. Jon saw faces. He always saw faces, and later, when he tried to sleep, he would see them again, and those faces would look back at him and demand their own breath. He spoke not with the roll of words a lord would choose to gather a hall. He spoke as a man who would have preferred fewer words and more fires. "I will say hard things plainly," Jon said. He did not have to raise his voice much. Quiet makes space for quiet. You know what I saw at Hardhome. Those of you who didn't see were there anyway in your sleep after men told you their version. Here is mine. The dead walked. They walked like men walk. They moved like men move, and every noise in their bodies had been taken away and turned into one sound. They have leaders. They are not mindless. They learn. They test a road before they take it, the way we do. They watch the way a hunter watches. They do not tire. Their patience is longer than winter's. Someone near the back began to cough and stopped, ashamed. Somewhere else a pot rattled where a hand held it too tight. They drown the living, Jon said, and his voice stretched, as if the words were leather that had to be pulled tight to mend something. They climbed cliffs man by man to turn a village into meat. They turned children into weapons. I'm telling you this because we need to learn to forget everything that isn't a part of stopping that. Your grudges, your house words, your humor, your habits, your names. If it isn't a food or a blade or a plan, we must put it aside and pick it up again after if the world has hands to pick it up with. He reached down, and Bowen Marsh, without looking at Tormund, passed up the king's letter. Jon held it where those closest could see the seal broken and the script inside, thin and black. The king in the south has offered me a kind of wardenship. It will not make me lord of any hall. It will not give me lands. It names me something the south uses and the north has ignored. A warden for winter, for the roads, for the food, for the lines we draw so the dead find them and cannot cross. There are lords here and there who will lend their men to that, not to me. To it. Moore's Umber is one. There are others. I'll do it, but the watch must remain the watch, or everything that made us worth asking dies in the asking. He looked at Ed, who had forced his way to the foot of the table with a grimace that might have been sorrow or digestion. The men around him had made space the way men make space around a truth they don't like and cannot avoid. I ask, Jon said, that the watch choose a man to command while I do this work. I'll stand outside law while we make a law to stand inside again when it's over. I'll obey the watch's rules here. I will tell no man to take a side in man's quarrels. I will not go south for anything but food and iron. If a lord puts his pride in our way, I'll take his pride apart with my teeth and hand it back to him so he can put it together again when spring comes. A murmur wove through the crowd and broke apart, then became quiet again, as if the murmur had gone out to test the air and found it too cold. Tormund grinned to see men think. His grin was not unkind. One shifted and made the rafters crackle. A woman at the front with hair white from age and not frost leaned on her staff and nodded slowly as if keeping time to a song only she heard. A brother with scars on his hands said, not loudly, it should be Ed. Another said, I. Under his breath, like a prayer he didn't want a god to hear and laugh at him for. "God save us all," Ed muttered. "Pick a man with worse jokes." He did not step back when hands pushed him forward. His face could not have looked more ill than it did, which soothed John in a way he did not care to examine. "I will not make you," John said to him, "but I will ask you." Ed lifted his eyes, which were the eyes of a man who looked at a field and recognized every stone in it, even the ones that wanted to hide. "Well," he said, "if the pot is boiling and you're stepping out of the kitchen, someone has to move it to the cool side of the fire, don't they?" Bowen Marsh closed his eyes and shook his head once, as if someone had placed a crown of thorns on him as a joke and it had turned out to be real. "All those metaphors," he murmured, so only John could hear. "You pick up bad habits. Worse habits keep men alive," John said. They did it with a show of hands because there was no better way. Men raised their hands as if attaching them with cords to Ed, who stood as if someone had stuck him with a pin and he was respecting the pin's will. Some hands did not rise. There were men who would follow only the shape of their vow, and that too was a thing to be honored when you could. Ed lowered his head as if accepting a blow, and then lifted it again and cleared his throat with the resigned disgust of a man who had swallowed a fly. "All right then," he said. "Don't come running to me for extra rations and long holidays. I am a miser and will be twice the miser now that I've an excuse." The roar that followed was not loud in the sense that battle was loud. It was heavy, a dense rolling sound like grain poured into a bin. Tormund slapped the table, so hard John felt the blow in his knees through the wood. One clapped his great hands together softly, and the wind bowed the rafters in protest. John raised a hand and the sound sank, obedient not to him but to what they were making together. He looked at the men who hated him, counted them, and thought of them as part of the plan rather than an obstacle to it. When you built anything half of what you used was rough and resented the shape it was being forced into. He did not name himself anything. Others would do that to him whether he wanted it or not. He simply said, "We will set posts at the roads with paint on them so that when the drifts cover the words, the color will still speak. We will assign rides to carry the new rules to villages that have never seen a rule they didn't choose to ignore. We will gather a tally of stores. We will burn what must be burned before it has a chance to kill us twice. We will make the dead hate us for being so stubbornly alive." Later, when the hall had half emptied and then filled again with men who could not stay away from where a decision had been, Tormund came up behind John and thumped his shoulder with a hand like a tree root. "You are a thin man to hang so many coats on," he said. "No fear. We'll stuff you with food until you make a better rack." Bowen Marsh stayed near enough that the warmth of his unhappiness could have heated a smaller room. "There will be letters," he said, as if saying the word gave him a rash. "From Carhold, from the Dreadfort, from men who put Lord in front of their names as if it were a bandage that will keep their heads attached. Some letters will be friendly with knives hidden inside. Some will be knives sharpened into letters. I'll answer them with the same letter," John said. "It will say, 'The dead come.'" Bowen rubbed his face with both hands. The gesture aged him in a moment. "You want so much for men to be good. I want them to be practical," John said. "I can't afford to want more than that." That night, with the work of the first day done and the last of the kindling burned in the Lord Commander's hearth, John sat on the floor with his back to the bed and Ghost's head resting across his knees. The direwolf snored once, in a small, almost human sound, and John smiled without his mouth moving. He stared at the coals until they became all the red suns he had ever imagined as a boy when he closed his eyes against the snow, and he let the weariness come into him the way the cold had come, slowly, like incoming tide that did not intend to stop. He did not let sleep take him. He went over the lines they had drawn on the map and turned them into steps men could take without thinking. He added and subtracted men from columns he had written with chalk on the table, rubbed them out with the heel of his hand, put them back again. He reread the king's letter and Davos's plain note and wrote 2 replies in his head. One dutiful and careful, the other shaped like gratitude but built of stone. He would have to pick one when the sun rose. He would have to agree to be seen. Ghost's breath warmed his thigh. Beyond the wall of the room, the keep murmured like a sleeper with a dream she did not like. The wind put its mouth to the window and whispered a word too old for any man to understand and too young to have become a rule. John put his hand into Ghost's ruff and thought of Winterfell because thinking of it did not feel like stealing from a past that was not yet finished. He thought of the taste of apples taken from a barrel in the cellar when nobody saw, of sweat wetting a shirt at swordplay until the linen stuck, of Bran's shriek of joy when he found a nest full of broken blue eggshells and discovered that wonder sometimes looked exactly like ruin. He thought of a hall where the fire was always tended and the bread smelled like home. They weren't his. He could call them to mind and not claim them. The work before him was not the work of a lord's son in a hall. It was the cold work of the roads and the line that must be held in the mind. He could feel it like a rope around his waist. He could feel other ropes too, the ropes that tied his choices to other men's sleep. He would tug them all. He would not let go of any of them until spring cut them for him. In the morning, men arrived to lend their eyes. They were not grand. A flint with a coat mended so many times its original cloth could hardly be guessed. 2 men from the Bar Rolands who could tell the age of a grave by the way the wind ran over it. A woman from a croft near Queen's Crown with a dog that could find a well hole under 3 feet of ice. They came because they had heard the shape of the thing and found their own shape fitted it. John listened to them the way he had learned to listen to quiet. For the syllables after a man finished speaking, for the part of a woman's talk that she left out because of shame or habit or knowledge that men tune their ears to their own thoughts and not to hers. He took their words and made them into posts and carts and schedules. Ed proved a miser as promised. 2 men asked for an extra ration after the noon meal, and he gave them a story about a baker who stretched his dough with water until the bread went wet in a man's mouth and slid down the wrong way and killed him. "I will not be the death of you in that fashion," he concluded, handing them each a radish as if a radish were a treasure taken from a pirate ship. "The other fashion I reserve the right to EXP. Arrayment with." Bowen Marsh found a scratchy piece of red paint and a shaggy brush and set boys to painting the tops of posts in bright squares so that when snow laid itself down, men would see color and know which way to turn. "Mark the ones that lead to the wells with 2 bands. Bowen instructed, surprising John by thinking of such a simple thing. 1 band for warmth, 1 band for water. 1 band won't save you, 2 might. Tormund collected a ring of boys and girls for his game, showed them how to roll the broken wheel by walking beside it and slapping it with a stick just there to keep it from falling. The laughter in their mouths made a sound John had not heard in the yard for months. When the wheel fell and a boy cried because he had wanted to be the one to keep it, Tormund put him on his shoulders and made the wheel a crown. "There," he said, with great seriousness. "This is what it will be to be a lord. The thing will fall, and they will put it on your head and say it fits." The ravenry seethed. Birds rattled on their perches, feathers oiled dark as ink. Clydas, lined and labyrinthine as an old field, kept the tally of messages going out until the columns leaned. Word to Eastwatch, word to the Shadow Tower. Cautious feelers to White Harbor for something that might be named Alliance and might be named Courtesy. John wrote a letter to Moore's Umber in a hand that was neither graceful nor ugly. He did not write for the eye that loved curves. He wrote for the eye that loved sense. He thanked the old man for what he had offered. He offered him in return a promise the North could nail things to. At dusk, a little snow came down, not determined enough to make a storm. Flakes drifted like slow sparks and died on Ghost's nose. The sky went from dirty pearl to pewter to iron, and the ground went from brown to white to a confusion of half and half that made men misjudge distance. John walked the yard until his boots soaked through and then walked it anyway. Men stopped him to ask questions he did not yet love. "When can my wife join me? What if my son falls sick? Will the dead come if we keep fire burning day and night?" He told the truth when he could, which was not often. He told them what piece of the plan would touch their problem. He told them where to be in the morning, and then they had the dignity of purpose to stand in for hope. A rider came in with his horse's ribs showing like the ribs of a boat washed ashore. The rider's lips were cracked in a way winter made and heat could not ease. He brought a letter from White Harbor that smelled of fish and lavender and of the sea as it should have smelled. It explained little, promised less, and suggested, with a caution that was almost shy, that if the work were what the work seemed to be, the Manderleys might send flour north even if ships had to break ice to do it. John sent him to Ed, who made him eat before he would say anything else to him, and who put him to sleep on a bed magic would have envied. In the night John woke and did not know why. He lay with his arm thrown over his eyes and heard the keep breathing around him. Ghost's head lifted off his thigh. The direwolf's ears went forward. John slipped his hand from beneath Ghost's jaw and sat up. There was no sound that explained itself. He dressed with the haste of habit and strapped on Longclaw because there were men who slept easier knowing he slept with his sword near. He went out into the corridor and found Melisandre there. The Red Woman's cloak shedding the kind of heat that made a man's skin know it before his mind did. She did not start. She did not look surprised. She had the look of a candle flame brought inside a cave. "You have stepped into your shape," she said. Her voice was the voice of a fire that had learned to talk so it could persuade wood to love it. "I have stepped into work," John said. He made no more of it. She smiled a small smile that made no promises and then made some anyway. "You will need more than iron and men's agreements. I will take what I can get. The king's hand has sent you sense," she went on, light striking the gems at her throat until they seemed to pulse. "The old man in the woods has sent you stubbornness. The girl with the scar has sent you her assent because she knows it matters to feel part of a thing, even when we know we are only a splinter. My fires have sent me this. When the cold comes and you put your hand up to stop it, something will slip behind you that looks like a friend. Guard your back." John went still. "If you would be so kind," he said after a moment, "tell your fires to be less fond of riddles." "They were once," she said, and for a moment the mask slipped and he saw weariness. Not of body, but of belief. "They were once. Men have learned to make them coy. Will you stand with us?" She tipped her head as if measuring the distance between a heart and a flame. "I will stand with the living. Sometimes the two are close enough to be mistaken for each other." "I can't pay you," John said, not because he believed she came for pay, but because naming obligations aloud made them less likely to turn into ghosts later. "You can, when the time comes," she said, "with something that is yours alone." She turned, and the air both cooled and felt safer when she was gone. He returned to his chamber and found sleep had fled into a corner where even ghost could not flush it. He did what he had done as a boy when the winter winds made the shutters shake. He counted, not sheep. He had never liked sheep. He counted the faces of the men who would die if he made the wrong version of the right choice. He counted the faces of those who would die if he made the right version of the wrong choice. The numbers changed each time, which meant the counting was a foolishness that nonetheless gentled the mind. Morning made white where gray had been. The world was a paper sheet that men had written themselves on with their footsteps. Ed had begun. The practice of sending men to retrace paths so that those who came after would not wander into whiteness thinking the world had moved when it had not. Tormund taught his will game to a second flock of children. Bowen Marsh took the giant aside and, by way of signs and patience, taught him how to lay logs in a crisscross at the edge of a hollow so that if something heavy came that way, it would break through and be trapped with its legs caught at the knees. One did not speak to him or nod. He simply stood long and patient and then reached down and set a log with a delicacy that made something in John ache. The day after that saw a rider from the Shadow Tower with a bit of bone in his ear and a simple request. "Rope. We're running out," he said. "We're tying everything with old sinew and hope. Men come in with a sledge and leave with a string. You're rich in rope." "Rich?" Ed said. "That's what they call men with extra string in our days." "Very well. I'll give you rope and you'll give us something else when we cannot do without it. Don't try to guess when that will be. It will be when we can least afford to pay." The rider took the rope with a relief that softened his face. He left with a bit of cheese in his pocket also and a feeling that the world was better ordered because a miser had blessed him with string. White Harbor's second letter came with a small loaf tucked in with it that was finer than any bread the keep had seen in months. It was slightly stale by the time it arrived, but men ate it as if it were cake, because of what it meant rather than what it was. John read the words and understood what Wyman Manderley had done. He had not promised enough flour to feed a town. He had promised to send it to a place lords did not think about. He had promised a show of obedience to a winter rule. It was a small thing. It was the small things that made a plan become a fact. There were bad letters too. Carhold sent one that was like a wolf's snarl translated into script. "How dare you tell me where my men will cut ice and how many will stand on the road to Greywater when it floods? I will do as I please. John wrote back and explained what roads were and what floods did and how the dead traveled, as if he were teaching a first-year boy why a sword blade must be oiled. He sent the letter with a man who wore no device and carried no sigil and had a way about him that made the dogs ignore him. He expected a worse letter in return. He would write a worse letter back if he had to. He had decided to treat pride like snow, something you moved through without blaming it for being what it was. He did not forget Winterfell. He did not set it as a prize at the end of this, with music and everything that men want to be at the end of a story. He let it be the hearth in his mind. When he thought of the word Warden, it did not come to him with a luster of honor. It came with the smell of extinguished candles and bread. He did not confuse either with glory. On the third day, he stood with Roder in the yard beside a sled with its runners polished to a shine. The boy's hands had stopped shaking. He had learned how to let his jaw rest in his skull without clenching it against cold, because you learned such things if you didn't die. John put into his hand a pouch with 5 small packets of something powdery and white. Salt? Roder asked, puzzled. Lie, John said. Ask a woman older than you to show you what it does to old bone. Tell your lord I'll send men to teach his men to burn the things that don't burn. Every village has a midden with things that were not meant to survive. We'll make sure they don't. Roder strapped the pouch under his coat with a gravity his age did not yet deserve. Will you come to Last Hearth? John finished for him. If the road asks me to. Roder nodded, not trusting his voice. He had come to deliver a message and found the world waiting for him to join it. The sled set out. The runners hissed like breath. Crows flew up the way coins fly when boys argue over them. John watched until the sled disappeared into the white and turned back to the work that filled the yard to its edges and spilled over them into the world. No lord sent him a gilded chain. No king sent him a cloak of office. He had no badge to show a man in a dark lane and make him believe. He had men with posts and paint and lists. He had crows that were stubborn about being asked to fly into a wind that looked like a wall. He had Tormund's will game. He had Ed's stinginess. He had Bowen Marsh's dry grief and surprising sense for the useful details about a well or a rope. He had the heavy quiet of the giant in the corner. He had the dog that could find water under ice. He had the woman who had braided the hair of 5 dead boys and now braided rope and showed others how to do it with their fingers in the thick gloves winter demanded. He had the memory of a sea filled with bodies and the cold deciding to move as one, and he set all of that against it. On a night when the sky was so clear that men could not bear to look at it for long, John woke with the sense that the room itself was listening to him breathe. He held his breath and heard nothing but Ghost's slow lungs and the creep of ice forming at the casement. He rose and opened the small chest where he kept what little was his. A strip of cloth Tycho Nestoris had left behind with a scribble on it that meant money in a language no raven would care to learn. A shard of an old shield with the paint rubbed off until only the wood's grain made any pattern. A small flat stone that had lived in his pocket since he had found it near a stream as a boy and decided it was the shape of some animal's ear. He took out the weirwood token the mountain woman had given him that afternoon. A sliver of pale wood not carved at all, but simply polished, as if to say the tree's own shape was the thing to honor. He held it in his palm and did not pray. He made a bargain with TH. Be quiet. He promised the work. He promised to see faces and not numbers. He promised to read men's letters and women's eyes. He promised to let the dead teach him nothing but the exactness of their hate. He promised not to make himself a lord because it would undo the only thing that had made this possible. He promised to be Winter's hand until Winter let go. Ghost stood and put his head into John's hip, as if the wolf agreed with the decision he had not heard. John rested his palm against Ghost's ear where the fur was thin and the skin warm. He set the weirwood token by the hearth where the heat would not crack it, where the light would find it and make it a little bright. He lay down and closed his eyes, hearing outside the uncountable, small shifts of ice as it built itself another layer. He slept without dreams until the first shout of the morning made its way into his room like a bird. The morning's shout was not fear. It was men calling to each other about carts and logs and a rope that had frozen so that it held the shape a hand had given it. John threw on his clothes and went out among them and let the day take him the way water takes a piece of wood and teaches it to turn. There would be battle, of course there would. There would be men with names who hated his name, or what was not quite his name. There would be letters that came attached to men who carried knives in their sleeves and smiles on their faces. There would be nights when the fires went out because no wood had been cut, and mornings when food did not appear where it had been promised. There would be treachery that was obvious and treachery that was simply a man being too tired to do what he had said he would. There would be stories told in halls about how he wanted a crown, how he had put his hand out and felt for it in the dark. There would be children who died under snow without any of that making a difference to them. But today there were posts to paint, and a boy to send to a farm 2 miles south with a note about a well going sour and the right way to fix it, and a giant to teach to lay logs in a crisscross and not eat the paint because it looked like berry juice and everything red should be tested by mouth. There was a woman who needed the line of men who would come if she banged a pot with a spoon because she had slept without a husband for 15 years and was very good at it and did not need a man unless the dead were at her door. There were 100 tiny matters and some not so tiny. He did those matters one by one. The title found him anyway. Men spoke it under their breath at first, as if trying out a new word in a language they had always known. Winter Warden, some said, because it fit in the mouth better than Warden of anything as large as the North. Others used snow with a new weight. Snow Warden, Snow's Warden. The words would shake down into their proper arrangement later. Words were like snow too. When the first raven came back from White Harbor with a second sack of flour tied to its leg like some obscene joke, the men laughed because laughter was fuel. When the first small patrol returned from the forest, bristling with brittle branches and with deer meat under their cloaks, the free folk laughed because hunting was still a kind of defiance. When the first letter came from Carhold with fewer teeth in it than the one before, the Black brothers laughed because a man's pride fighting itself could be entertaining from a distance if the man had not yet brought his fight to your door. Tormund came to stand beside John at dusk and squinted into the yard as if seeing a dream from a day ago and checking if it had the sense to become real. "You'll do," he said grudgingly. "Not great, but you'll do. I know men like you. Boy, you'll carry a thing too far because you don't have the odd sense to drop it at the river and let it float down to another man. That will serve us, until it kills you." John did not look at him. He watched a boy show a girl how to put a strap through a buckle with gloves on. He watched the girl learn it, her hands going from clumsy to precise, her face unaffected except for the slight tilt of a grin she didn't mean to let out. "Everything kills us," John said. "We spend our life choosing how and when and for what." "True," Tormund said, with an affection he expressed by not hitting John on the back hard enough to stagger him. "But usually we don't do it quite so publicly." They stood there until the sky had less to give. The cold bit. The yard emptied slowly as the men with duty stayed and the others went to the heat and the smell of food. John rubbed Ghost's ear, the old gesture now a creed. The direwolf blinked, unbothered by men's resolves, content to belong to his own. John thought of a sea filled with the sound of one sound, and he set the sound of men's voices against it. In the weeks that followed, the work grew itself like frost growing on a window, each pattern ghosting the one beneath and yet not erasing it. The posts stood with their red-topped heads above the drifts, stark against the white like wounds that had learned to be useful. The lists on the table were touched so often that the charcoal blurred where men's fingers sought their own names as if finding themselves on a page could save their bodies. Ed's arithmetic became a law. Tormund's games became drills. Bowen Marsh grew thinner and, in growing thinner, grew less likely to be mistaken for a man who had forgotten how to be kind. On a day when the light went strange, blue and thin, and the air's bite made men swear and then stop swearing because their mouths could not spare the pain, 2 riders appeared from the east with their hoods iced into peaks. One bore a banner rolled and tied to a pole. John did not need to see the color to know which lord's device would unroll there. He felt the thread of his plan tighten and hum. He stood at the gate while they dismounted and pushed their hoods back and stamped their feet. "You bring a letter," he said, because there were forms and following them saved time later. "I bring a lord who doesn't like letters," the older rider said dryly. "Stannis Baratheon, king on the narrow routes that still remember kings, sends you a 3rd word to add to the 2 in the first letter. He says, do it. Do it quickly." The rider's teeth flashed in chapped lips. "I have never in my life heard the king tell a man to do a thing quickly. You are blessed. Or cursed. I'll pick one later," John said. He reached for the pole and untied the banner and let it drop. The cloth fell and the stag leaped, frozen in that leap as if it knew it had been painted to leap forever. Men in the yard went quiet, not in the way they did for fear, but the way they did when a shape in the distance became a creature in front of them and proved to have eyes. John folded the banner back up. He handed it to Ed. "Put this up," he said, "where men can see it and remember that the South has sent a good thing for once. Then take it down when it sours their eye. We are not following a stag. We are following the road. I won't have them forget which is the thing we rely on. As my Lord commands," Ed said, suffering visibly as his mouth got used to saying Lord about a thing nobody had set on John's head. That night the sky shone with a cold aurora like the ghost of fire. Men went out into the yard and looked up and did not speak. Even Tormund fell quiet, because some shows are old enough to make laughter a sin. The light pulsed, pale green and white and a bruise of violet where it did not mean to be pretty. It made the snow glow as if lit from below. John stood beneath it and felt small without feeling punished by it. He let the world be large enough to make him feel that way. He put his hand on Ghost's shoulder and stood there until his legs ached and the light went out as if a giant had taken a breath and blown it like a candle. Come day, work again. It was all work and it was not enough and it would have to be. Men came in with news. A cart stuck at the ford 3 hours right away. A farm where the cow had calved too early and the calf had frozen before it learned the taste of milk. A hamlet where a man had claimed he saw blue eyes in the fawn after dusk. John sent 3 men to the ford, 2 to the farm with a pot and clean hay, and 4 to the fawn with a sack of obsidian and orders to come back before sun left the world. He stood by the fire in the solar and warmed his hands and looked at the map where the lines had multiplied until they looked like something living. He traced them with a fingertip and felt the thread of his plan hum again, that vibrating hush that told him the pull would be felt elsewhere. He thought of the title they were giving him and let it be a coat against a cold he did not love but had to accept. He thought of Winterfell and did not turn it into a prize. He thought of the dead, not as a fear but as a fact. He thought of living as a stubbornness. Ghost lifted his head and gazed at the door, eyes glowing like embers under snow. There was always something coming now. Letters, men, trouble, friends who would not remain friends. Enemies who would not remain enemies. And something else too, something with hands and a familiar warmth that would slip behind him while he faced the cold. He remembered the Red Woman's words and did not let them become the kind of prophecy that makes a man live in future tense. He stood his ground in the room, with the fire at his back and the map in front of him, and he made himself be present there as if presence itself were a weapon. The knock that came was neither timid nor bold. It was a practical knock. He opened the door. The woman standing there had windburn on her cheeks and a braid so practical it could cut rope. She was wrapped in gray and brown and nothing that would take a man's breath for beauty. And yet John's breath changed. He knew her face the way a man knows a path he has not walked in years, but that lived in his feet anyway. "Sansa," he said, and stepped back to let her in. He felt the world tighten another thread and did not mistake the sensation for the rope now. It was something else. Another line drawn in a hard place. Another promise. "I brought you too many things and none of the ones you need," she said frankly, and her smile was a winter sun. Thin and bare and warm anyway because it was real. "I heard they were making you into something. I thought you might need a sister to watch it happen and tell you which parts are foolish." He closed the door against the cold, and Ghost circled them both and made his approval known without any prophecies. John breathed in the smell of her cloak, horse and wind and the faintest touch of soap, and he let himself have the luxury of remembering what families were made of. Small, ordinary things named aloud in rooms where no one listened to take advantage of the saying. He would have time to ask her what road had brought her, what names she had heard thrown like knives these past months, what rooms she had endured and what kindnesses had surprised her out of nowhere like a hand catching a falling pot. That was for later. For now there was warmth and a cup and the first minute of seeing a face and letting it become a face again and not a ghost. Outside, the hall murmured. Men ate. The post stood. The dead did whatever the dead did when the living weren't looking. The map lay on the table and accepted their eyes. The title they had given him, and he had allowed, sat on his shoulders like a cloak he had not yet learned the weight of. He would learn it. He would learn to move with it without thinking. the way the hand learns to balance a sword so that the sword becomes part of the man and not his burden. He would carry it. He would set it down when winter allowed him to set it down. He would make of it a tool. He poured Sansa a drink that would make her cough and warm her anyway. He let her sit by the fire. He sat beside her. Ghost arranged himself at their feet like an old truth, which is to say, something you can lean on that doesn't care whether you believe in it or not. Jon listened to his sister's first words and her second set of words and the words she did not spend yet. He stored them as carefully as he had stored the lie and the rope and the flower. He made a place for them in the plan without yet knowing where the plan would take them. The work waited outside the door like an old dog, faithful and demanding. The night deepened. The cold pressed its face against the window and peered in without malice and without pity. Jon did not pity it in return. He had named it his enemy. He had named it his season. He had allowed men to name him what the season required. He would accept both names until the world put them down for him. He would walk the roads. He would hold the lines. He would keep the fire from going out. He would see faces and not numbers as long as he could stand to see them. He would make tools out of pride and songs out of orders, and he would go to sleep. Sometimes, when Ghost allowed it, and he would dream not of dead seas but of a wheel kept spinning by children's laughter, and a rope thick in the hand and the smell of good bread in a hall that might someday be his to enter without feeling he had stolen anything at all.